Why do men start acting more feminine in relationships over time, and what is the fix?
Well, it's in the culture. Just look at the movies and the TV shows. It's, the man is no longer the head of the household. The woman is the head of the household. She's very stoic, very masculine, and the guy's the fuck up and the idiot and the liar and then always makes mistakes. And he acts like a chick. He can't make a decision without her permission. And it's just a yes dear type of attitude. And so when you see that archetype thousands and thousands of times from the time you're a little kid till you grow up and you become an adult, that looks normal. Again, look at the movies from 60, 70 years ago. I mean, one that I often mention is It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed. Look at that movie. Men were men, women were women. And or Charade with Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. Men were men and women were women. And I mean, just look what happened to the Star Wars franchise. Look at Kathleen Kennedy, who had always worked for George Lucas, and then he put her in charge of Lucasfilm. And what do you have now? Luke Skywalker's a big fucking pussy. He hides out on an island. He, sinks his X-wing fighter in the ocean, so he doesn't leave, and he's just turned into a bitch. In the original series, he saves the galaxy and brings balance to the Force. But in the subsequent ones, he's hiding on an island and he needs a little skinny girl who never had any formal training, Daisy Ridley, who's absolutely gorgeous and I think did a good job in the movie, but it's just not real. But in real life, that kind of shit's not going to happen. But of course, I see that in all of those new Star Wars type shows where it's always the women that are the saviors of the galaxy and the men are a bunch of bumbling idiots and they act like girls. And so how if that's all you see in the culture, and then you take into account the music and the soundtrack and the sound effects, it emotionally anchors you to certain behaviors, certain ways of thinking and feeling and being. And a lot of parents, I'd say probably the majority of them are like, hey, here's an iPad, here let me turn the TV on, and they let the TV and the computers and the iPads and the cell phones basically raise their kids. And so you grow up kind of brainwashed, basically. And then you look at academia, you look at college. I posted several clips over the last week or two on my Twitter of these women that are in universities just talking about how they're seeking power. It's the only way for them to get power. And they don't talk about how they're trying to educate kids, teach them reading, writing, math, arithmetic, things they need for life. Their whole thing is I want to turn people into activists. They're socialists, they're Marxists, they're communists. And if you look at the communist revolutions that have happened all over the world over the last 150 years, that's what you get. They take over the school system, they indoctrinate the kids, and then once the kids get old enough, it's, the mafia elite, the people that are kind of funding and running the communism, they get the kids to basically be their foot soldiers and bring about the revolution. And if you allow them to indoctrinate your kids to that way of being that tries to make the sexes equal, equity, if you will, then that's what you end up with. And to date, over 150 million people have been murdered by the communist, Marxist, socialist, collectivist governments. You look at, I mean, Mao's his Great Leap Forward, which you can read about. You can Google that and read about it. But I think he starved to death something like 25, 30 million people just in a few years when he did that. He was doing a mass experiment on his own people, and they murdered, like I said, 25, 30 million people. You look at Russia and Stalin, and then because socialism has basically been tried on 6 continents and over 100 countries, and it's failed every time. The most recent one that we hear about is Venezuela. And what happened to all the Venezuelans? They left Venezuela and they came here. I mean, that's Chunky's Venezuelan descent. That's one of the reasons why his family left, is the Marxists and the socialists took over and they wrecked the country. And they basically cause a brain drain. And all the people with money that can leave do leave and they go to other countries. So it just always ends in death and destruction, and you end up with a mafia elite that rules with an iron fist, and they kill anybody that gets in the way. And you can't get rid of them because they disarm everybody. It's one of the first things they do is take away all their guns.
It's the Jews.
It's the Jews. Go, okay, John. Okay, Brainiac.
Thought.
So the other thing is you look at how they kind of divide people up and get people fighting against each other. And you got left versus right. It's polarity consciousness. And there's, you get the minorities, the indigenous people versus the white European settlers that came in and conquered, the colonizers, if you will. And it's just interesting. Look like Dan Bilzerian, Candace, what's her name? Candace Owens. So like the polarity consciousness, if you ever seen like a coin sorter, like where you dump a bunch of coins in and it because of the side they flip into the right one, they get stacked very neatly. There's all kinds of us versus them type of traps that you can get stuck in. And so John got stuck in the Jews trap where they just say the Jews are all the problem, like all the Jews of the world are a big conspiracy. And you have to be a low IQ moron to fall for stupid stuff like that. So good for you, John. Congratulations on being a moron. It's just like the other thing in the school system that's being pushed. The evil rich people are the problem. If we just, it's like what's his name, De Blasio, Bill De Blasio, that was the mayor of New York during all the lockdowns. He was like, we have plenty of money, it's just in the wrong hands. Because socialism, Marxism, collectivism is always based upon envy. In other words, that person, the reason I don't have the things I want is that person over there has got too much stuff. So we need to go take his stuff. And it's much easier to blame other people and say, well, the reason I'm not successful, the reason I don't have money, or I don't have a nice house, or I don't have a girl, or I don't have a car, or I don't have a great career or great business is because those rich people. It's their problem. And like I said, it's how they get people fighting amongst each other, get different ethnic groups fighting against each other, the Arabs and the Muslims against the Jews in the Middle East. And so it's just across our society, Democrats versus Republicans, conservatives versus the liberals. That's just typically what you get. And so because most people are in polarity consciousness, which is us versus them, it's which one are you going to get trapped in? So you got to see that I would say there are Jewish people that are bad people, but there's Christians that are bad, there are atheists that are bad. The problem is the global elite. All you got to do is look at the World Economic Forum and the way they think, the way they talk. You can see their videos on the internet where, they think it's their destiny to run and regulate every aspect of people's lives. But even them, a lot of them are useful idiots to the Chinese because the Chinese for the last 40 years have been doing business deals with these idiots and people like, Bill Gates, because Bill Gates thinks once we have the UN runs everything, that he's going to want to be one of the people running the world. But what will end up happening if the Chinese communists are successful is Bill Gates will be one of the first dudes that's lined up against the wall and shot by them once he realizes he's not going to get to share power with them. So that's because again, the Chinese communists, the ones that are running China now, they believe this is their turn to rule the world. And I mean, there was a professor, Jack Posobiec, shared a clip. This is probably 5-6 years ago. It was a professor. He was given a lecture in Beijing, and he was talking about the United States, how 40 years ago they looked at, okay, who are the people that really run the United States, the real power behind the power, and it's mostly through Wall Street. And so they decided to do business deals. And he joked about, and obviously it was all in Chinese, or I guess Mandarin, you would say. But there was the translated clips. And you can see what he's saying. He was talking about the Bidens as one example, how they had done business deals with them to basically buy them off. And it wasn't just the Bidens, it was all the people, all the global elite. That through Wall Street and through money and through business deals, they've basically been able to buy off the elite of the West to do stupid things like, hey, let's import millions and millions of unvetted people from the third world. Let's get people to inject themselves with DNA altering drugs even though the Chinese didn't inject their own citizens with that. Anything they could do to weaken the West, they've been doing, and the people at the World Economic Forum are basically useful fucking idiots. They don't realize that they're being manipulated and used to destroy their societies. I mean, look at the UK. I mean, the problems that they're having with all the Islamists, they can't even address it. They throw you in jail. But the guy that, does the R word to little girls, he gets out in a matter of months. But if you post something mean on Facebook pointing that out, they'll throw you in jail for 3 or 4 fucking years, which that's insane. You can't even fix the problem. It's like the migrants and the people that are coming in have more rights than the citizens. And then the citizens are taxed, and these people come over because like, oh, we need workers, and none of them work, and they have one kid after another, and every time they have another kid, they get more government benefits, they get government housing, and especially with the Islamists, they go to the mosque, and you've got Islamic preachers that are preaching the jihad basically. They can't do that in Saudi Arabia because they chop their heads off. In Dubai, United Arab Emirates, they put you in prison for life when you try to preach that shit. But in the West, it's allowed to continue. And so they brainwash the people that go to the different mosques that, hey, just we'll outbreed the native population, and then we'll be able to take over, run for office, and impose Sharia through the back door without ever firing a shot. I mean, they openly brag about it. They film it, and it's all out on the internet. But the people that live in the UK or in the West or whatever, it's like these idiots come and preach at some of the mosques, or in South Florida where I live, and they're allowed to get away with it. Whereas in most of the Middle East, it's the Muslim Brotherhood's banned in Saudi Arabia, it's banned in United Arab Emirates, it's banned in Jordan, it's banned in Egypt. But in the West, these people basically fleed the West to come here to preach the jihad. And so they're basically building fifth columns in all of the countries in the West. And you only got a few decades left where, I mean, you look at like Sweden and the Netherlands, it's like you got about another 20 years, and they're going to be a minority in their own country. And when they're the minority, the majority will be able to vote themselves Sharia law. And a lot of people are going to die if they don't do something about it.
Bobby, this
Something positive and to look forward to in life, But you can't solve problems unless you can talk openly and honestly about it. And that's also part of the reason why Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, because he sees what the West is doing, which is basically committing cultural suicide. And he would rather have Ukraine in the Russian orbit because the way he looks at it is the Western elites are going to fucking destroy it and make it a woke mess right on their border. And Kyiv, that's really the heart of where Russia was founded. So Putin looks at it as like he's got a limited amount of time to grab as many of those countries and pull them back into his orbit before the West just basically commits suicide in the next 20, 30 years. So, that's the perspective. I mean, because again, you can see the translated clips. They're available on Twitter where they openly talk about their thinking and why they're doing what they're doing.